welcome back. And today we're going to continue with chapter 21 of ManQ, where we are basically trying to understand the theory of consumer choice. And what we are doing right now is the income effects and the substitution effects. And we are doing how the same principle is applied to different concepts in economics. So we did the income effect and substitution effect, and we saw how that was applied into the labor supply curve and how it impacted the our decisions when wages change. Now, in a similar vein, we are going to do a new application today, which is in the intertemporal choice. So let's first understand this word intertemporal choice. So intertemporal basically means across time periods. All right. So if you look at it broadly, let's say a consumer is alive for two time periods. Okay. This is period one and this is period two. Now he earns income only in period one. So assume, let's say he earns 1 lakh rupees as his income only in period one. All right. He earns nothing in period two. All right. So this is his income. So we'll call this is M1 and this is M2. So and this happens in our life, right? So P1, you could assume being all the time periods in which you earn, and P2 is all your time periods, which are retirement. So we have just clubbed it into two separate groups. P1 is earning and P2 is retirement. So you are earning in some time and retiring and not earning in another time period. So the question that we are posing here is, how do you divide your consumption across these two time periods? So let's call C1 as the earning in period one and C2 as the earning in period two. Now you have some utility across these two periods. Okay, why do I write this? So your utility in the two time periods, as I've written, is just the addition of the utility that you get in individual time periods. So U1 C1 is a utility. If you consume C1 quantity in period one, you get some utility out of it. If you consume C2 quantity in period two, you get utility out of it, which is U2. Why I put log here is because this is some kind of a discounting factor. What is the meaning of discounting factor? So whenever we do economics, we always say that a consumer always prefers to get results now. So the preference is that I should get results today. I should have what I want today. So if I want food, I want it right now. If I want to order that pizza, I want to order it right now. If I want to get into, I say, aaj hi jana hai. So so people are impatient, and that impatience results in something that we called as instant gratification. So what we earn in one period is what we get now is instant gratification. What we get sometime in the future, it doesn't give me today's at that much satisfaction. So today's satisfaction, what I'm the pizza, if if you can promise yourself that no, I won't eat the pizza today, I'll eat the pizza tomorrow. That's not so satisfying. Eating the pizza today, right now, is satisfying. So instant gratification holds a lot of value. So what we've done is that if there is a certain utility which is derived from consuming today, there is value to consuming tomorrow also. You want food tomorrow also, but the value of getting food today is higher than getting food tomorrow. So if the value of getting food today is, let's say, 100, the value of getting food tomorrow, let's say, 75. Yeah, so the utility of something in period two is just lesser. We're not saying it doesn't matter, but it's just lesser. Getting pizza tomorrow is not as satisfying as getting pizza today. So that's why we say that the utility function is something like this. This is not always to be true, but something like this, that a higher utility to what we consume today and a lower utility to what we consume tomorrow. Okay, so like this, we make a utility function for consumption across the two periods. Okay. Uh, or the U1 and this thing can get confusing. So let's just call it, let's say, some function of C1 and some function of C2. Okay. So this is how the utility function, the overconsumption in the two periods look like. And C and C2 are the consumption. That's what we care about. We care about consuming. Now, what's the budget line that we have across these two periods? So, since I don't earn anything in period two, how do I consume in period two? I can only consume in period two if I save something in period one. So, whatever is my income in period one, minus whatever in my consumption in period one, that's my saving in period one. So, whatever I save in period one, I can consume in period two. Now, there's an added thing to it. Our savings earn some interest. Okay, let the interest rate be R. Okay, so if you invest S1 in period one, all your savings, if you invest in period one, you get S1 back and you get S1 into R back. So that's the interest part, and this is your principal. So your total amount is both of them together. So if you take S1 common, that becomes S1 into 1 plus R. So if you save S1 in period 1, I have S1 into 1 plus R in period 2. So what I can consume in period 2 is actually savings in period 1 into 1 plus R. So my consumption in period 2 is actually S1 into 1 plus R. So my consumption in period 2 is M1 minus C1 into 1 plus R. If I open this bracket up and I take C term to the other side, this becomes C1 1 plus R plus C2 is equal to M1 1 plus R, right? Now, this is the budget line of the consumer. Okay. So if I draw this budget line, all right, so how do I draw this budget line? There is C1 in period 1, there is C2 in period 2, consumption in period 1 and consumption in period 2. What's the x-intercept? So that's going to be this divided by this. So sorry, not this divided by this. This is going to be m by px. So C1 is going to be m by px. That's the consumption in period 1. So m is m1 into 1 plus r and px is 1 plus r. Okay, so C1 is basically going to be equal to m1. Why is that? Because in period 1, the maximum that you can consume is just m1. If consumption in period 2 is 0, the maximum I can consume in period 1 is M1. In period 2, if I consume nothing in period 1 and I save everything, then the maximum I can consume in period 2 is M1 into 1 plus R, right? So the budget line is this. And what's the slope of the budget line? The slope of the budget line is Px by Py. Py is 1. Px is 1 plus R. So the slope of the budget line is minus 1 plus R. Okay. So this is my budget line. So let me draw it properly here. So this is, let's say, the budget line with C1 here, C2 here, and M1 here, M1 into 1 plus R here, and minus 1 plus R is the slope of the budget line, right? Now, this is the slope of the budget line. This is the budget line. And the equation of the budget line is C1 into 1 plus R plus C2 is equal to M1 into 1 plus R. Okay. Now, this is the budget line. We also have the ICs. So the utility function U is equal to function C1 plus log function C2. So you have a utility function, we have a budget line, we find the equilibrium, which is at the tangency point. And this is C1 star and this is C2 star. Okay, this is point E1. This is utility from C1 star and C2 star, right? So this is the equilibrium. So this is something that we understand. If you have a budget constraint, if we have a utility function, we can sort of find the equilibrium. Now, the interesting part is what happens when the rate of interest changes. So let's have a look there. So this is a person, same thing that we already did. Different ICs that we have. And then we will have one budget line and the point at which the MRS is equal to the slope of the budget line, which is minus 1 plus R. That's the equilibrium, right? Now, suppose the interest rate rises. Now, when the interest rate rises, there are two effects which are taking place. How? Let's see that. There is a substitution effect. Why is there a substitution effect? Because when the interest rate is rising, we are getting more for our savings, right? So when the interest rate rises, saving becomes more attractive, right? When our interest rate rises, savings is very attractive because you earn a much better return. So for example, if today I tell you that um, I'll give you like a 20% return on your whatever money you give me. I'll give you a 20% interest rate. That's a very, very high interest rate. So if you think about compounding, you think, oh, I can double my money in 4 years. So it's like today if I have 100, I can have a 200 in the next 4 years. So that is very interesting. So savings becomes very attractive as the interest rate rises. So with the substitution effect, you feel that, oh, maybe not current consumption. Maybe I should wait for future consumption because future consumption is going to be super great. So your saving becomes very attractive. You want to substitute your consumption in period one for consumption in period two. Okay, so this is called the substitution effect. Because of the substitution effect, there's a tendency for current consumption to fall, for saving to rise, and for future consumption to rise. So that's the effect of the increase in rate of interest on consumption in period one. So in today, that's the effect it has on our consumption. Our current consumption shall fall. But then there is an additional income effect also, that because of the increased rate of interest, and the fact that you can earn so much more in period two, then you don't want to be a pauper in period one and a king in period two. You want to have more consumption in both periods. So you want to kind of distribute your income in a manner. So you may think that, oh, because I'm earning so much more in period two, because of the rate of interest, maybe I can actually increase my consumption in period one, save less, but still increase my consumption in period two. So what may happen is that because of the increased rate of interest, even if you increase your current consumption, you reduce your current saving, but still you can increase your consumption in period two because of the rate of interest increase, right? So you could increase your consumption in both the periods. So that's the income effect. Okay. And this income effect leads to a fall in current savings. So if you know that, oh, I'm going to earn 200 in the next period. So then you want to try to increase your consumption in both the periods. You don't want to be a pauper in one period, right? So there are opposing sort of factors, opposing effects. One effect is pushing you to save more. One effect is pushing you to save less. So who wins? Who wins is anybody can win. So sometimes, because if you're in a little short of cash and this happens, you may want to reduce your consumption in one period one, and increase your consumption in the second period. This is what it happens. If your substitution effect is more powerful than the income effect, so then the consumption in period one will fall. So if this was your current consumption, when the rate of interest rises, your budget line actually becomes steeper. This point does not change because this intercept was M1. This intercept was M1 into 1 plus R. So this increases, and your slope was minus 1 plus R. So that also increases, right? So budget line becomes steeper. Now, when that happens, the new equilibrium point is to the left of the old equilibrium point. And when that happens, it signifies that my consumption in period one has fallen, but my consumption in period two has risen. This is when your substitution effect is dominating income effect. But the opposite also may true when you are happy in life and you feel that, oh, anyways, I have enough. And then you are going to get even more interest in the future. You might just increase your current consumption. So in that case, income effect is dominating, and that's what we have here. What we have here is that um, it's the same increase in budget lines, but the utility function is such which will, in when you increase your rate of interest, the income effect dominates and consumption in period one rises. Consumption in period two is also rising. Okay, so it's not that consumption in period two is falling. Consumption in both the periods is rising because of the higher rate of interest. All right, so this was about the income effect and substitution effect, and this was about chapter 21 of ManQ. So we are at the end of chapter 21 of ManQ, and this is in continuation of our series of the Delhi University Semester 1 Introductory Microeconomics, and we are going to be back again with the next topic in this series, and we are going to complete an entire introductory micro syllabus through these lectures. So I hope you enjoyed today's lecture, and I'm going to see you again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.